Welcome to the Good Ride. Today we're talking about a new board for 2026, the Trooper, replacing the Snow Trooper. It takes a lot of design elements from the Trooper, gives it a more blunted nose and tail, a little more surface area there, gives it a little longer length per size, and changes up the camber profile a good bit. It went from rocker and camber to triple camber fusion. And while it can feel a little hooky, the camber profiles can fight each other in certain conditions. It doesn't 1 foot flat base that well, and it is harder to access the springy parts of the camber. This still is a forgiving, pretty easy to ride board that has decent but not amazing float and powder, excellent grip that doesn't grab in soft snow, and a fast base. So if that appeals to you, maybe this could work. I rode this primarily with Union Force bindings and Nitro Team TLS boots in a decent amount of conditions and compared it against several other all mountain boards, which is what this definitely is. And just so you know, this is an honest, objective review for you, not for me to promote the brand. Never Summer has no say in what I say, and I can do this thanks to your support, and especially thanks to sponsors like Blower Board Shop. They've been around forever, selling to snowboarders longer than most. Resorts have been allowing snowboarders. They're family owned with a large online presence, excellent pricing, customer service, and shipping. So if you want to support a great shop and honest, objective, in-depth content, click through the links from the Good Ride to Blower Board Shop and spend your hard-earned cash there. We greatly appreciate it. Now, when it comes to sizing, this 57 fit me really well. I could easily ride the 161 if I wanted a little more stability, a little more speed, a touch more float. But this is the perfect combination for me to have a mountain freestyle personality when I want it, and a more all mountain to freeride personality when I want it as well when I set it back. Sizing is very different rider to rider, so it really comes down to personal preference. So when it comes to shape, this is directional but not tapered. The nose and the tail are the same width, and they seem to be very close in length, and you have a very centered feel on board. When it comes to stance location, you're looking at 13 millimeters back from center of board at what I think is probably a 21-inch reference stance. Never Summer doesn't mark their reference stance, so I'm just going where most brands do. Now, the difference between setback on side cut and setback on board at this 21-inch reference stance is only 0.625 of an inch back from center of board, so not that far back from center. And if you want to set it all the way back, you're only looking at 1.75 inches back from center of board at a 21.75 inch stance width with full-size discs. So this is on that border between all mountain and mountain freestyle. You can set it back a little bit more than you can a traditional freestyle board with a centered stance that's a true twin, but not much more. When it comes to camber profile, you have this triple camber profile, a very mellow camber that's very short, right between the inserts, that then goes to rocker, to a mellow elliptical camber that doesn't come all the way back down, to rocker, and then the nose and tail. So a lot of bends happening here, and it's not a very stable board underfoot. It doesn't have that super loose auto spinny feel that most of their hybrid rocker shapes like rocker and camber have, but it's far less stable than their recurve camber profile, which is camber past the inserts with some passive bends instead of active bends like these to rocker. This can feel a little hooky, like it's gonna catch an edge, but then often never does when one footing off a chair or flat basing around the mountain. And it always likes to be a little bit on edge, but even then, sometimes I find that the camber profiles can fight each other a little bit. But I'd say once you get used to it, anybody from a beginner to an expert can ride this. It might be a touch on the boring side if you really like a lot of that camber feel. The softer the snow, the more stable this feels. The harder the snow, the more hooky and off it feels. And that's what takes getting used to. Now, when it comes to edge hold, Never Summer just does this right. They have a multi-radius side cut that provides very good grip to start with, and then this triple camber with these 2 camber points ending right here, along with this passive camber, when weighted down, grips really well too. And this grips like full-on old school Magna traction from Mervin, but it doesn't grab in soft snow like that Magna traction does. So I think they have something really special here when it comes to grip. This is great for those of you who see a lot of hard to icy snow. Let's talk Trooper Flex here. It's stiffer than it feels on snow for sure. As you get down into the tail, it's pretty soft up here, but then right here as it transitions into, I guess you could call it the effective edge, even though it's pretty high off snow, it gets a little stiffer there. Gets pretty stiff over this camber area in the insert pack, and then between the feet, it's not that soft. Same over the front here. And then in the nose, a little bit softer flex. And then it stiffens up as it transitions back into this mellow camber profile. When it comes to buttering, it was pretty easy to access both the nose and tail for a butter, and I had no problem doing so, and I don't think most riders will either. And then when it comes to pop, I found it somewhat complicated. The old boards that had a good bit of rocker and then more camber, I felt like I could leverage pop more from the middle than I can with this. And also when set up on reference, I feel pretty far away from the more higher, more active points of the camber. So it's harder to leverage those and get them to pop. But if you can, and you ride like a snowboard instructor, really wide kneed, and you get that pressure out over the tip and tail, it pops pretty well. If you ride like the rest of us with a more normal stance width that's a little bit more in, this doesn't pop as well, but you can still get it to pop with a little bit of effort. But this does track into and land well on any little side hit I tried, and I was surprised that when you launched off those, it gave me more pop than I would expect for the camber profile that I described right now. I still got more pop out of recurve, but I felt like this was close to their rocker and camber profile, their first time they started making rocker with a passive camber. And if you want to land switch, keep riding switch, this is a great board if you want that mountain freestyle personality, riding more on reference stance. This will be fun in the park. It's not a bad board for pipe because of that grip. It's not a bad board for hitting kickers of all types as long as you track well into it, being a little bit on edge. And you could hit a jib or two with this if you wanted to. And when you take this flex personality into hard uneven snow and soft uneven snow, it does well in both places. And while Never Summer only rates this as a 6 flex and a 5 for dampness, their perspective of dampness is different than the rest of the industry, and all their boards are much more damp and handle soft, tracked up uneven snow better than you would think for this flex. And the edge stays quiet in hard uneven snow pretty well too. It's obviously not an ultra damp chunder buster, and I did feel it buck and bounce around a little bit in some soft, tracked up, thick powder starting to go towards uneven. It's still handled very well for what it is. And when it comes to turning, I felt like the turn initiation was really good for me. I liked how quick I could get this board edge to edge. And when I got it on edge though, I just didn't feel like I was getting that camber spring out of the turn like I was with the Benchmark that was rocker to a pretty easy passive camber. That's a little easier to access, and it had a really good fun spring out of the turn if you back foot weighted it. And then in comparison to, let's say, my old Cougar or the new Eclipse with recurve camber, I felt like I had more drive and spring out of that. But if you center weight your turns here, this engages this camber and turns through a carve pretty well. It hurries it up a little bit, but not like the old boards that had rocker underfoot here. If you really bring your knees out wide and go for that that squatty-like instructor stance, you can engage that camber point more, but that's not my style of riding. Most people don't ride that way. And if you bring it in this way, it's a little less likely that you'll engage it, and that's more what I was feeling. But overall, it's okay for a carve or a harder turn. And the turning radius is pretty balanced. You can do just about anything with it. And despite most of the side cut being on the more aggressive, deeper side on the outside, this camber profile works with this flat part here more than this part. So it tracks pretty well if you want a straight line and you're slightly on edge, or make those longer drawn out turns that end up really building speed. This can do okay with that, but it's not great. The side cut doesn't fight you as much. It's more the camber profile when flat base can do this and feel a little hooky, a little like it's going to catch, and that can sap confidence for a straight line for sure. And when it comes to base glide, Never Summer always does a good job with their bases. This holds wax well, and it keeps its speed very well when it's well waxed. It's near the upper tier for sure. Now, when it comes to powder for a centered ride, this isn't bad. If you're like a more mountain freestyle centered approach to powder riding, this will do a pretty good job. If you like to set it back, you're not going to get that far at 1.75 inches back from center of board at 21 3/4 inch stance width, like I mentioned in the beginning. But I thought it did okay. It had decent directional float, but there are a lot of other all mountain boards out there that have much more float. So overall, while the Trooper didn't really appeal to me and my riding style with this triple camber profile, I felt like the three camber profiles fight each other a little too much for my personal taste. I definitely prefer recurve triple camber, and their old rocker and camber profiles like Ripsaw and especially Shockwave. But I could see how this board will work for somebody who's, let's say, a beginner, intermediate, maybe even advanced rider, but just wants to cruise, wants excellent edge hold, good base glide, and an easy overall ride. This could for sure work for you.